ISO FileMaker Magazine, the professional's resource for FileMaker know-how.
Hi there, my name is Matt Petrowsky. I've been a FileMaker software developer for well over 20 years, and the video that you're about to watch is a live stream that I recorded live. Now, if the content that you find doesn't really match what you're looking for, it's very possible that this is a video that's part of a series. So if it doesn't make sense where you're finding this particular video, then just click on the description down below and you will find a link that will take you to the full series, and you can start with video number 1 and go through all of the videos in sequence. If you like the content and it helps you out, then great. If you'd like more information, then you can always check me out at FileMakerMagazine.com. All right, so there we go. Switch to my desktop. Check my settings over there. Look at you right here in the camera. We're back doing another lesson. I'm just doing live development here of a solution in this series, as the intro mentioned. You are able to click on that. It won't be in the description right away as you're watching this live, but there is another way, or there's content that'll be in the comments after this is finished recording that you'll be able to get to it. Let's open our COVID solution. I'll log in here, and I got the wrong password. All right, so today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be working on the user interface, and that is going to be, let's set that for 15 minutes. I like to keep these right around 15 minutes. So the user interface in FileMaker, that is typically what drives your some of your decisions about how you're going to structure your solution, but it shouldn't be it doesn't directly say, okay, based on the user interface and how you create that, that's how you structure your data. Most of the times you structure your data and then you adapt your user interface to that. There's a whole form follows function thing, but we won't get into that big debate. We'll just work here on FileMaker. So in layout mode on this solution, I sort of have to decide how I want to approach this solution. In previous videos, we've taken a look that right now our data structure is set up such that we have our fields. We know that this is going to be a pre-capture table. Our relationships, I started to show this. In fact, somebody commented on YouTube, which you're always free to comment down below, that I'm going to start to create a circular dependency here. Yeah, that's true. And the great thing about FileMaker is the relationship graph is so flexible that you can just reconnect things, rewire them up. So in order to do this, I probably have an ID companies, and there we go. And I would have restructured my database, and I wouldn't have my circular reference. We will talk about this at a later point in time, the actual structure. What I need to do right now is I need to start to think about how I want the user to interact with this solution. Now, anytime you get a FileMaker database, you can always go up to the Manage and then the Layouts area with Command-Shift-L. It will bring it up, and you get a really good idea of the organization. I started to lay this out in a previous video where I have all of my developer-specific layouts, something the user never sees. Then I have my solution layouts. UI-specific means the user is going to interact with them. Initially, my capture was based off of the initial table occurrence that I had, and I want to clarify the difference between these two right here. Capture and capture is very important in FileMaker. If you are learning, the distinction is that this particular layout, my developer layout, is based off of a developer table occurrence, and this layout is based off of what I'm considering a UI table occurrence. When we go into the relationship graph, those are the two different ones right there. So this is my developer table occurrence. It will never get connected. This one is my UI. Now, one of the things we decide to do, which at this point we're not there where we need to plan some good organization strategies in the graph, is I like to go from the top down in my solution design in terms of what the user hits in terms of their interaction. I'll be introducing a startup table into this solution, but for right now I've got this table occurrence, and the UI is based off of that. So we look at that, we confirm, we can see that here on this layout my table is capture. And I can always go to this particular layout and select the layout setup for this layout and make sure that I'm showing from the proper context. Context means that whatever you select here, that establishes the context, and then in the relationship graph, whatever this is connected to is what it can see in terms of the data. So again, the structure of your data doesn't dictate your user interface. So now I'm thinking, okay, I need to come up with a way that the user is going to interact with this. Now, doing a user focus group is always the best way to get your best usability, because the users and the way that they use something really matters. For example, users that are already used, many times, users that are used to a common paper format, it's almost a little bit easier just to not be fancy and come up with something new and just replicate what they're already used to in terms of that paper structure. Yes, sometimes it's not ideal, but sometimes you'll get users that will revolt and won't use your system. So if you use some of the things that are familiar to them, great. In this situation, we've got a COVID solution where I'm envisioning that somebody's driving up. The first thing they need to do is capture a license. So I'm not going to have this data on screen. And down here at the bottom, I had added this. This is called a button bar with multiple buttons included as I select them. This button bar is not something that I want. It's typical of an iOS application to have this down at the bottom. But I'm thinking I want to put the user into a forced flow of a wizard type of situation, and it's going to be one where the user needs to click on things. This is also a good opportunity to talk about, Matt, do you actually mock up your designs? I have worked on teams where designs are mocked up, but many times I don't mock up designs unless I know it's going to be a much larger solution. I like to just start in FileMaker because FileMaker has mock-up tools that we can use. For example, this text tool, I can drag out a box right here and I can put in portal of companies or something to that effect, and then I can obviously turn on the line by going over here and then saying I want to have this box have graphics, and I want to set it to a line, I want to set it to solid, and I'm going to make it black right there. So I can very much use these boxes right here within FileMaker in order to do some quasi markup. So if this was going to be a field, I can basically mock things up. And I'm using the Option key in order to drag these around right here. These could be fields of whatever I want, and I can just double click and type in here. This is also a good opportunity to say that when you're working in, excuse me, when you're working in layout mode, all of these tools, you'll notice that when you select here, it has this initial selection, and when I go in and I type some updated content here, and when I click out, notice that what it's going to do is it's going to switch from here back to the selection tool. So this is very much a unique part of FileMaker's UI. Notice that it went back to that, but this one happens to be blue. So it turns out that every one of these tools in this area, this top area when you're in layout mode, can be double-clicked in order to lock them. So if I wanted to update each of these pieces of text without FileMaker going back and reverting to this tool, I double-click and you'll see that it turns blue now. And I can type here and then click here and click here. That becomes a really useful thing, especially when you're in layout mode and you want to work with multiple objects or lay out multiple objects. In fact, let's go ahead and look at that tip since we're here. You can see it still stays locked to this. There is a keyboard key that you can hit. I've got this short keyboard here, this Mac keyboard. And let's see, let me zoom out, see if I can see the video. So we'll see if this comes up. So we are looking at right there. You see the return and the enter. So that little return is triggered by the little function key. Let me put it straight for you right there. So on a Mac, if you want to move to that other tool, it's the enter key, which normally is on extended keyboard. On the 10 key, it's the enter, which is separate from the return. But if you use that function with the return, that's a very valuable thing in FileMaker. It also accepts dialog boxes. So you can see that as I click it right now, it will accept, and then when I hit it again, which I just held down the function key and the enter, my tool just reverted back to this tool. If I do that again, FileMaker should go back to the most recent tool, which was the text tool. And you see, I just did that. Hold down that function key, hit the enter key, the return key, which will act as the enter key, and you'll see that you can toggle between the two most recent tools. A very useful tip when you're working in FileMaker Pro. So what I was going to show you here is when I'm mocking things up, I might select this and I would duplicate this. Now FileMaker duplicates 10 by 10, I believe. And in FileMaker 18 and higher, FileMaker introduced the ability to shift things by 10 if you hold down the Shift key. So the Shift key plus the arrow key will allow me to move this back 10. Actually, it looks like it's off by 1. So now I'm going to use the arrow key. There I've got my guides that just came up, and then I'll move that down. Now FileMaker remembers a sequence of steps such that from the time that I duplicated that, as long as I didn't select something else, FileMaker remembers each of those steps, the moving back 10, then 1 pixel, and then down 10. So when I hold the duplicate, Command D right now, you'll see that I'll get a bunch of them on screen. And that's really useful when you're wanting to lay out a bunch of those objects. And now I could just hit that function return, and I'm in the locked text tool. And I could type more there. I think you get the idea. These are all really helpful things in the UI when you're working a lot. Just being able to do things quickly. Command A, select, and edit. All right, get off that tool. And also, in order to make it so that the toggle doesn't go back and forth between locked, you just need to click it a single time again, and then it'll go to the light shaded color. Double-click lock, light shade is going to give you the power you want. So I'm thinking about my design here, and I want to have this be a procedural thing that as a user drives in, or a patient drives in, obviously the first thing I need to capture is the license. We've already talked about that. So I am going to mock up my UI here, and I'm going to do it with these little faux checkboxes that I'm envisioning here. And I'm going to say, I want a solid line that is a little bit darker here so that I can see what's going on. So this is going to be what I'm thinking of as a 3-step process in my mock-up here. And it's going to look a little bit like this. I shouldn't take my boxes away. Scan license. And then after that, it's going to be take sample, which is the swab. Take swab. I'll just go ahead and put that. And then before the person drives away, I'm imagining that they need something that knows what the transaction was that my database is capturing. And I'm going to call that one issue receipt. If I spelled that right, I before E, except after C, yeah. So I want to do this in a sequence, but I also want to be able to have users make mistakes. So I have to think about, this is the user interface is the point in time where I decide I've got to think about what is possible that could go wrong. Okay, there's going to be procedures and policies in place where the user scans the license. Fine, we've got that. We know that's capturing fine in our database. Now they're going to do the swab. Okay, policy is going to say, okay, only 2 people up and 1 person does this, but only 1 person grabs this swab or the vial. We do not want to mix this vial up with this license and stuff like that. Some of those policies get integrated into your UI in terms of controlling what the user can and can't do, and some of them end up being checks and balances. So I'm thinking in this, it would be really cool that if you drive up and you want to be sure, there's going to be a way to check that the user got the data that they got. So you have 1 person do one thing. If that person makes a mistake, then the second person is the check or the redundancy. They're the spare tire that you have in your car. So I need the user to be able to go back to the scan license process and also double check on the scan swab that the ID or however that vial is coded, that's what I'm going to get. And then finally that the receipt, we can double check that against the data as well. So in FileMaker, we have a lot of different tools that we can use. Anything that you want to do that's procedural is either going to be a tab panel, where that's the method where the user's actually going to be able to tab between this, or you're going to use your slide control. Now, obviously, the difference between the two is in FileMaker, underneath the hood, I can tell you this, FileMaker doesn't really care what the difference are. These are multi-panel objects, and the only difference is one shows tabs where you can put a value with a word on that. Otherwise, we have these little dots. Now, you can turn the dots off. This panel is absolutely really good for a multi-sequence thing where you don't want to give the user the ability to actually go back and forth unless they meet certain requirements. So in this controlled environment, I'm probably going to want to do that. I probably want to scan the license. Once I've captured it, then I can move to the next stage, but I can also give the user the ability to go back to a previous stage. So I can turn off swipe gestures right here because I know that we're going to be using this in mobile. And I have now taken full control and responsibility for this panel. FileMaker by default defaults with 3 on most objects. So if I make a button bar, it's going to have 3. If I make a tab panel or a slider, it's going to have 3. You can certainly have a single panel object. And let's take a look at the attributes of this particular object, become familiar with that before we wrap up this video. I know 15 minutes goes by really fast, but I'll just be heading into another video. And those of you that are watching live right now, you can also ask your questions if you have any questions. In fact, I'll check over here. No questions so far, but a couple hello. So hey there. And looks like we've only got 23 people online currently watching. All right, so let's take a look at our slide control, make sure we are familiar with it and what can be done. So under our Appearance tab, we are always interested in what are the attributes or the qualities of a UI widget so that we know what are the cool things we can do with it. So in this particular one, we look at this and we've got control over the slide control itself as a whole. The panel, which is what we can see right now, is the white part, and then the dots. Now, what's really nice about this is if you think about this, when this comes on by default, I have multiple places where I can put a line, and I have multiple places where I can put a fill. So if I put on a line of 1 point on this around the outside, you can see that I've got that outside blue line right there. Then if I select this and I go to the panel itself, let's play with that and let's set that to a red line right there. So I know it's hard to see right now. In fact, there's a tool that I use when I'm working on the user interface. You can get these on Windows, but on Macintosh it just comes by default. Yes, I'll wrap up here in a second here. It is called Digital Color Meter, which is an application that you can access on the Macintosh, which is really pretty nice, that allows you to zoom in here and it gives you the color values that it passes over. So if you ever need to sample colors from any other application on the Mac, you can get those colors by simply sampling over this. And right now I'm not displayed in hex, but if I wanted to capture this and it was some other application, I would be able to switch this by going up to the view and changing the display values, as you can see right here, to hexadecimal. So by changing that to hexadecimal, it doesn't matter what's on screen. Let's say I wanted this gray down here. I can see right now by looking at that, it is 28, 28, 28. So if I wanted to replicate that color, I would be able to go into FileMaker and then say, okay, I want to match what I just sampled off of my desktop by selecting the slide control. Now the slide control itself has a fill. Let's fill it to that 28, 28. So there's our solid color. I click on this, and this is where I would put in that hexadecimal, 28, 28, 28. And the interesting thing about FileMaker is if I tab, sometimes it isn't accepted. You can see there is no color that changed right here. In FileMaker, it's got this odd behavior that you have to actually click right here, and you can see that it now accepted that color. And we can see that it's in the background. So the great thing about slide controls is you can make them completely transparent. And this is I wouldn't call it an advanced, this is probably an intermediate technique. But within a FileMaker layout, it's actually possible to have multiple sub-layouts using a hidden tab panel. So in this, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take control over this environment within this layout, and I'm going to do it using a slide panel. And it's what I call an off-screen panel. So I'm going to set the background, the actual wrapping of the whole of the slider, to nothing. I'll switch to the panel. I'm going to set it to nothing. I will turn off its line. I'll also turn off the line on the panel itself. And then the dots themselves, they don't really matter, but I want to turn them on and show you so that you know how to control this. We'll turn on the dots right there. We, of course, can turn them off, but I'll need to temporarily show you the panel, and that'll go to a white fill. Now, the issue that we have sometimes in order to make this a fully transparent panel happens right here in this advanced graphic area right here. So when I have this selected, the control panel, notice that we get this little bottom, this 3 right here. So this is the value when you are on the slide control itself, that when the dots are turned off, that's the 3 that we see right here. So using our digital color meter, we can see that there is 1, 2, and 3. And we're now touching the highlight blue line that FileMaker has right there. So if you want to remove that gap after you've turned off the dots, it's simply a matter of simply just reducing that right there. So what we have now is we have a full tab panel, no dots, turning off the ability for the user to swipe back and forth. And I can set all of the parts to be a fill of none. So this is what I call it. This is completely transparent. The user doesn't even know that there is a panel right here that has 3 individual places that we can show on screen. So one of the things that I like to do, which I'll probably do in this design, I mean, I'm always thinking about the design and this solution when I'm not recording, but I'm also trying to think of it while I'm here so I can instruct you and show you how I develop. An off-screen panel to me is one that I don't just leave here. This right here is very nebulous. I don't know that it's there unless I go over to the objects panel right here. I can see that there's a slide control. In fact, this is a great way to select sub panels by going to panel 2, panel 1, and panel 3. Hopefully my head's not covering that there. But I like to know what's on screen when I'm designing in FileMaker. So what I'm going to do in this situation is I'm going to create a style of an off-screen panel. And by the way, I'm going to turn off my corner radius because it doesn't display. There's no point in me having it. And an off-screen panel to me is one that I know is there. So what I like to do is I like to give the off-screen edge an actual color. And for some reason, I've always hovered in this purple area or within the pink area just because it's stark and it's typically not a color that I find in my UI. So there's a strong color, but at 1 point really isn't enough for me. So I like to usually bump this up to like 10 points. So what this tells me now is visually, when I come into this layout, I can see, I have an off-screen, what I consider a transparent off-screen panel, which allows me to show multiple different things. In this case, it's going to be scanning the license first, then switching to panel 2, and taking the swab, then panel 3, but being able to also guide the user or allow the user to go to those different panels, which we can do with buttons, which we will see. So with this style set up, I now am going to go over to my styles area. So in this style area, I have enlightened. I talked about the fact that FileMaker, you're never modifying FileMaker's original, you just copy it. In this case, I can see because of the asterisk and because of the red that this is a modification to the default style. I do not want to save changes to the current style because if I do, that means I am saying all brand new slide controls in this FileMaker database are going to look like this. That's not what I want in this situation. What I want is I want to save a new style, and I like to call it just off-screen panel. There we go. Or if you're going to use tab panels as well, I also have off-screen tab panels that I use, and basically all that is it's a tab panel. We may create one in this series, but it's off screen and you right align the buttons so that the buttons themselves are off the screen. Now there's one last thing we need to do before I wrap up the video, and that is in this section I need to use my auto sizing and anchor this such that this is never going to be seen by the user, this area right there. So when I extend this out, or whatever I decide to use here, I'm able to put within this area all of the things that I want to do. First will be capturing the license, second will be taking the swab, and then third will be issuing the receipt or whatever. So I can put whatever buttons I want within this, and when I'm in browse mode, we can see that the user never even knows as I size this out. That purple part you can see stays completely off screen, and that's what I want it to do. This is the beginnings of my UI as I've thought of it thus far. Of course, in the field or with people actually using this, that's going to be the best, but I don't have access to those people, and maybe this will get used at some point, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just using this for the purpose of training and putting in some stuff that does help people as well. But I think I'm going to wrap on that one. I probably went to 20. Let's check if we have any questions on this particular episode. And right, yeah, we do have a few of them here. So I'll pop out the chat, and I'm sure you already saw them for those that are watching live. So Jan asks, on the Mac, can you use SIP? Yes, there is an application called SIP, and that one is, I don't have that loaded here, but I do have, there we go. I do have that application. This is a pretty nice application. Sometimes it's uh, a little more than you need for color management. But if you are doing a lot of design and a lot of FileMaker solutions, then yes, SIP is a great application. In fact, it sits up in your little menu bar right up in here and allows you to sample colors and do all create color combinations. It even will go to a website and do color suggest color selections for you. We'll go through that at a future point in this video and cover that then. But that's going to do it for this particular episode. If you're interested, go ahead and I will start up a broadcast right after this one, and we'll be continuing on with where we are here, and we'll add a little icon and some stuff like that. So see you in the next episode. Always feel free to click that like button if I've helped you out, and subscribe if you want to be notified. The YouTube application will let you know when I'm going to record. So it's pretty cool. All right, see you later.